Good afternoon, everybody. It's David Irving. I'm sort of filling in here for Briar, inadequately filling in, I might add. Most of you will know, I guess, I'm the co-founder of the Icehouse, and one of my colleagues I've kept in touch with over, it's more than 20 years, but I met Neil Macintyre, who's our guest here today, 20 years ago. He tells me, I think, the second company into the Icehouse incubator back in 2001 when I first met him. And I worked with him a bit at the beginning, and I've always held him in high regard. He used to come to my Christmas lunches every year, so he was always welcome. Good friend, good colleague, who now we've got the opportunity to hear on what his life has been post that. And because he, in the last few years, has been in Myanmar, I just thought there would be a lot of interest in how how you find that country and what you've been able to do amongst so much turmoil. So anyway, we'll get to that. So Neil, welcome. Good to have you here, and I've got a few questions we will ask, and we'll no doubt go off those as well. But if we could just start, Neil, with you were a foundation member of the Icehouse. What was it like being part of it in those days, day one? What were we like then? What was the chaos?
So David, it's a strange thing to say, 20 years.
It is. It is.
I had been in business with the Sun Latte company. So I developed this specialised fresh milk to tap into the trend of people wanting to have cleaner foods, higher quality foods. We've been going for 5 years. I was able to have New Zealand Dairy Foods manufacture and distribute the product for me, and we moved it to the Icehouse. And that was an incredible experience. I wanted to focus all of our attention on the development of what are termed functional beverages, to get away from only supplying the local New Zealand market. To come into an incubator was a relief, insofar as we entrepreneurs live in fear in our living rooms or over the kitchen table, or whatever it might be, just small offices. And we've got maybe half a dozen, then we grow to a dozen people. But as the entrepreneur, you continue to face these challenges. You come to an incubator and you realise everyone else is sharing not dissimilar challenges. And it's a really empowering and exciting experience. So even after 5 years, and Sun Latte wasn't my first venture, I'd had a few ventures before then, but to come into an environment where we were changing dramatically, we were becoming much more an innovation company, to be able to work with others who were going through not dissimilar challenges was very satisfying. You were the founder, you were the co-founder of the Icehouse. Congratulations to you, because you created what became for me an incredibly important medium in my 10 years of operating the Sun Latte business here in New Zealand, and then 20 years altogether in the innovation end of dairy. So thank you.
Well, that wasn't hard. You were a pleasure, and you were in the dairy industry, and I'd been in food, so we could connect pretty well. So Neil, looking back then, what have you sort of not forgotten since those days that you might have gathered or learnt while you were in the Icehouse?
So what's interesting, in those days, I don't know if you still do it, the Icehouse now is a much larger organisation, and when you first started, it was very much the incubator. What was very important then was seeing experiencing the provision of workshops that would fill in the gaps for most of us in terms of, for example, with the finance market, what was happening with the finance market, what were the particular trends they were looking for, and what did we have to answer if we were looking for more capital. As an innovator, I was looking for more capital all the time for different projects. So without having really current knowledge of exactly what's firing up certain investor groups or private equity or the banks, you're at a loss. So that was an important component for me in incubation, was the provision of those workshops, if you like.
Yeah.
Really important.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
And Neil, you went on to sell Sun Latte, and sort of the Icehouse may or may not have played some role in that, but did that sell successfully? Were you pleased? And what did you move on to?
Yeah, so Forterra purchased the Sun Latte brand. In fact, we had two brands in the national market, Sun Latte and Sun Organics, and they bought both of those.
Yeah.
It was good for me insofar as the payment allowed me to buy out some shareholders, some investors, and to put real capital into the innovation process.
Yeah.
What it allowed me was, most important, was to get offshore, so specifically to Japan. Yeah. So we had 26 different products we'd taken through trials. We settled into 12. And of those 12, there were 2 products that we identified for North Asia, so specifically Japan and Korea. You have experience in terms of the Heinz Watti days of that whole relationship to Japan.
Yep.
So very complex market.
Very exacting.
Very exacting, unbelievably exacting. And just their demand for whatever you do to be done to their system, not your system. You know. Yeah. And I would say, look, we've met the standards in New Zealand, and they would say that's very, very good. Now you'll need to do clinical trials here in Japan. Yeah. Because that's very expensive. So what the sale process of Sun Latte did was provide me the capital to be able to do that. Yeah. So for 10 years I was involved in developments in Japan and then China. Yep. We got caught with the global credit crisis, so we weren't able to raise enough capital to really do what we wanted to do in those markets. Yeah. That's when we come back. I went back into business consulting here in New Zealand for a number of years. Yes. And then I wanted to get back into a real passion I have. And the passion is in understanding how we can bring expertise into developing emerging markets. As a young man, as a 20-year-old, I travelled to a country called Burma in 1979. And the 7 days that I was allowed to be there remained a highlight of a year travelling through Southeast Asia and North India. My sister had gone there in 2008 after Cyclone Nargis as a relief worker, so I visited her for 2 or 3 times. And that fired up this interest that I had, which was another set of products we had developed in the functional beverage space, dairy space, and that were a set of products for early intervention for child nutrition, specifically addressing child malnutrition. So the Myanmar market provided a huge opportunity for that. Over 50% of children are malnourished. So late 2013, I went there and I took 4 or 5 months to research the market. So try to understand consumer trends, try to understand the complexity and challenges of trying to produce a product cost effectively that you could penetrate the mass market, the sort of technologies we could use, and as to whether there were any local companies that I could invest in. The answer to the latter was there were none. That there are some small companies, but they're quite dysfunctional. So I then realised I had to do it either in my own right or with others. I got into a relationship with a large Myanmar conglomerate. We tried to make the verbal agreement of partnership work. It took 6 months for the chairman and I to agree to disagree. 6 decades of military rule in Myanmar have created a unique set of conditions where business behaviours are quite distorted. So what we would find quite offensive or incomprehensible, Myanmar, specifically Burmese, wouldn't even raise an eyelid. When I went there in 2013, Myanmar was the 176th most corrupt country in the world. And here I'm coming from New Zealand, where we vie with Finland to be the most least corrupt country in the world. So I found it difficult to work with this large conglomerate that had made money through acquiring assets very cheaply. So I then turned to my other passion, which is teaching. And I was teaching in an MBA program in Yangon, Rangoon, when I met the man I would form at the university with, my co-founder. So Richard Deere is
So you were founding at the stage that you were going to form a university. So here you are, you used to be at Sun Latte and you're in functional beverages. Then you have a go at business in Myanmar and you see you're not going to be able to pull that off. And now you've decided to suddenly to start a university. This is fairly entrepreneurial, or is it?
Or foolish.
Foolish, yeah. But it's certainly challenging. So tell us about your journey as a academic, Neil.
So I think it's probably more foolish, David. But teaching, what an incredible gift. If we can teach well, we can share ideas and knowledge.
Yeah.
That is one of the most significant gifts we can give to anyone, to any student.
Yeah.
You know this, you've taught.
Yeah.
It's also good for us not to find ourselves restricted to one identity in life. It's okay for us to have a few lives.
Agree with that.
So it actually took Richard and I probably 6 months to come to the idea of a university. The private education market in Myanmar at that time was pretty squalid, and we were working for a Singaporean business school that was all about delivering the least they could for the maximum amount of money they could extract from students or from the parents of students.
Yeah.
So Rich and I spent time, we travelled to the capital, Naypyidaw, which is right in the very centre of Myanmar. It was built by the former military dictator about 20 years ago. So it's a Canberra, a Myanmar version of Canberra. Yeah. We travelled back and forth 3 times, meeting with the Ministry of Education, trying to understand the changes that were occurring in the Education Acts and their relationship to private education. On the 4th trip, I raised the question of us actually establishing in the capital, and I was very quickly told that the capital was for Myanmar people, not foreigners. However, over a course of a few more months, it turned out that we could in fact establish the university there. The Director General, who had reminded us that the capital city was for Myanmar people alone, ended up becoming one of our students. Before COVID hit, International Leadership University, that I co-founded with Richard, became the largest external training provider to the Myanmar government. That was pretty exciting.
So how many students?
We have taught thousands of very senior ranked officials across many departments. The peculiarity, of course, David, you mentioned earlier the crisis that we've got in Myanmar. So we've got a military dictatorship emerging. So there was a coup on the 1st of February where the military overthrew the democratically elected government. Our relationship with the Myanmar government, of course, was with the former democratically elected government. Yeah. So, of course, all of that work, it hasn't gone to waste, and it will have value into the future. But for the moment, the country is in the grip of a very ruthless regime. But it's a regime that they understand well. They lived under military rule for 6 decades.
Yeah.
David, you know that business is, when you're leading business, you're sitting in the front of the roller coaster.
Yeah.
Just being thrown around.
Yeah.
To do business in Myanmar is riding on a double roller coaster because of the peculiarity with which they approach business. The peculiarity of an economy that doesn't make sense because so much of it is fueled from the drug trade, the sale of
which they've got an interest in.
They're the biggest manufacturer of methamphetamine in the world, and the a couple of small ethnic groups are involved in that, as is the military. So the economy is very distorted by business that we have little appreciation to understand. So the double roller coaster, you're hanging onto this thing, you're really getting rocked around. COVID came, and within a few days we were closed down on the 18th of March. By the 21st of March we were fully online. We put all of our programs online. We were one of 3 universities to do so. Every government university simply closed down, said the doors are locked. And those doors have never reopened.
So you got an increase in students coming from those that we closed down?
Yep, we got an increase of about 25%, which was fantastic. We were very happy. We could continue to see it growing. We also had a big boost in English language training. We didn't set up to be a language school. However, it's the first step for Myanmar people to start to explore the world, having to improve their language skill. So we had a big boost in English language students that happened all the way through 2020. 1st of February, no internet, no phone connection, nothing. So when finally they allowed fixed line internet, which about 8% of the population can access, our English language program had gone from 360 students at the end of January to 5. Mobile internet, which is what most people access, has come back, but it is intermittent. So the English language program now is probably about 80 or 90 students. Our MBA program is about 25 students. They're small numbers by comparison to what it was. There's of course no government training, and we had hundreds of students every week going through the government training programs. However, Myanmar is a country where it's a Buddhist country. You really need to pace yourself in terms of how quickly you might react. So breathing deeply and counting slowly in Burmese is a good way to slow your reaction, because they're very peculiar things that happen. So this thing of never say never is very relevant in Myanmar.
Well, it takes a special sort of person, special sort of New Zealander to be able to live in such turmoil and uncertainty. But, you know, as I think you would probably go on to say, when it comes to safety, that is quite a different existence to have to cope with. So you've decided really I have to look after my safety, and for your family's sake and all those that you're dear to, and you've come here, and I think one of the next things you're going to do this afternoon is run an online program with your students there. So you've retained your online service from New Zealand, isn't that right, Neil?
Correct. So the university is fully functioning, and what is incredible is today we are the only university in the entire country of Myanmar that's operating. So we operate, it would be 14 different programs, and they're all online. We've witnessed a fall off in students because of their inability to join, given limitations of the internet. But we're still there, and we're providing the access to knowledge, to ideas, to the international world of thought and so forth for hundreds of students. So that'll keep going. But the point you made is so relevant, and that is, it is a highly stressed situation. It's unusual being here because I drive around listening to the national radio, and I am getting my head around some of the issues that are relevant. And they are relevant, they're important to the people of New Zealand. And New Zealand is a wonderful, really wonderful country. But it's a bubble. And it's quite a small bubble in terms of, in particular, Asia. That Asia is just such a dynamic space. And the opportunities for New Zealand are profound in Asia. But to understand them, to access them, we have to be there. For the moment, I've had to step away from Myanmar, and that moment may in fact be years, because this regime could settle in as the last two dictators have. So the last dictatorship was 23 years, and the dictatorship before then was 26 years. So this current gentleman appears to be digging in. So it may be, David, that the investment I have in the university, that we continue online as we can. We bring in professors from around the world. So we're all teaching online, and in fact, online has been a great boost for us.
And I mean, people can do it from the safety of their homes, I suppose.
And that's the
relative
key.
Safety of their homes. I mean, you've certainly had to reinvent yourself. You've had to reinvent your business. You're living an adventurous life. You're a bit younger than me, but you're not a shitload younger. So full congratulations to you, Neil. But just before we close, I think it would be relevant. You've been away from the country a long time. What's it look like? What's it look like from Myanmar? But importantly, now you're back on the ground here. How does it feel compared to what you remember it to be?
David, evolution is important. It's part of being human. So I see systems have evolved here, and I'm struck by two things which aren't particularly attractive, I'm sorry to say. One is what appears to be further institutionalization of society. And I get this feeling of the strengthening nanny state, which in my view is exactly the opposite to what we need. We desperately need New Zealanders to be risk takers. We have an exceptional environment here. So if you fall over, as effectively I have with the coup in Myanmar, you can come back for a bit of respite before you go back out. But when you look at Asia, 50% of the population, it is where the growth is, and we can be part of that. To be part of it, we have to be risk takers. And at the moment, what I see, and it's early days, I've been here for 5 weeks, I think, but it feels as if just increasingly it's locking down. It's saying you've got to behave, you've got to follow, you've got to behave in a particular way. And that's not healthy for a small population that needs to be able to go and very quickly assimilate with very different cultures and really get to know those cultures well. In this, what are we, the 80s and 90s, New Zealand companies lost billions of dollars in China in the 80s and 90s. The 2000s, and then after 2010, New Zealand companies have made billions. Why? New Zealanders learnt Mandarin or Cantonese, they started living in China, and they started to assimilate themselves and understand that the Chinese are not a foreign force. The Chinese are a significant consumer opportunity for us. And that's what we really need, is for people to have that type of desire and energy to go and live in these foreign markets.
Well, look, Neil, I think you're finishing this this podcast on a note that reminds us of your experience, and your observations are actually very relevant back here, because you have been a risk taker. You have been a man who's always sought to do the right thing. Your areas of interest have always been in good works. You've been a stunning example of what a good Kiwi is, and if the current sort of nanny state needs some sort of energy and some risk taking in it and some execution, then you're a good man to have Alexis. So I do thank you very much for making us, as an old boy of the place of 20 years, it's great to have you back.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for this opportunity to share these thoughts.